The Bounty Hunters. The whole of the team is seated around a table on the chain breaker. The chairs are not designed for comfort, but entirely utilitarian. This is not a room of rest and consideration, but of information and deliberation. The table in question floats off the floor and has many inputs in the side to allow displays of information with a tiny projector within the center for three-dimensional images. "So, what do we know about the local gang lords?" Pukey asks his team while looking straight at Bike. "Bike?" Mustard asks. "Bike? The Hatton Mister?" T-ad, causing the German man to roll his eyes. "Not much. Suffice to say they don't exactly have want ads in the local paper." He begins at the groans around the table. He grins further. "However, I have a couple of contacts, mostly drinking buddies. They agree on a few things around the station." "Well, don't keep us in suspense." "What's the dirty?" Pukey asks. "The dirty? You mean the dirt," J3 notes. "Galactic trade doesn't have the inflection I like when you say the dirt. It doesn't imply what I want it to," Pukey remarks. "Now the information. Please. There truly are 8 separate groups of criminal warlords around the station, but each and every one of them act very differently. In our usual stomping ground of the nightlife, it's the casino owners." "Which one?" "There are dozens of casinos." "Yes." Pukey responds and smirks at the glare he gets. All of them are either in the pocket or directly owned by the same small cabal of women. They are simply the owners. Nothing fancy for a name, but nothing fancy is needed. They have a lot of money to throw around, and all the local business owners are at least partially in their pockets. My contacts aren't much outside the nightlife yet, so I know very little about the others and have even less confirmed. But I do know one more very interesting thing about all 8 groups. Which would be? There's a collective pool of talent they use on the station, a series of highly trained, highly skilled, highly motivated mercenaries that use Octaron Spin as their home, Bike says as he pulls out a data chip. He plugs it in and eyebrows go up as it shows an image of the Hats fight not too long ago. "We've already run into one, sort of. The Crimson Hewer clan is less a family and more a philosophy. They're obscenely dangerous, highly mercenary, and often tagged in around the station when leg breaking is the order of the day. It shouldn't be too bad. I've already beaten one," the Hat says with a grin. Then Bike switches the image to show a half-dozen gigantic Amazons in completely covering red and tan power armor with entire arsenals of weapons along their backs. On their pauldrons is the symbol of a sword smashing into a round shield. Their face-concealing helmets have a sharp V-slit for eyes and jagged patterns to really emphasize the shark-like nature of the Canador. They move in packs. Their armor is rated for spacewalks, grounded too, meaning your taser trick won't work twice. They've got an inbuilt communication network, so they're talking to each other and organizing as they pen in their targets and take them down. Bike explains as he flicks from image to image, showing these women tearing down different style opponents with ambush-pack tactics. This will be a problem. "Any known weaknesses to this armor?" Pukey asks. "If there is one, then they've kept it close to the chest. They've got a standard array of station-approved weaponry for ranged combat, including cannons integrated into the armor. From what I can tell, the tails work as an aiming device." Bike explains, going on to the next image, which shows a Crimson Hewer on all fours with the twin cannons on her back, following the direction of the tail she's using to direct it. "When they're on all fours like this, they're more like artillery than a simple ranged opponent. Bangers seem to be the name of the game with these girls, but there are a few that have a third cannon integrated, and that one will be an ablator if you see it." He moves the image of the Triple Canyon-wielding power-armored Canador to show a series of obscenely lethal-looking swords, spears, maces, hammers, and axes. That's not to say that these girls keep their distance. They like getting in close and finding new patterns to decorate their armor with. The girl that the Hat fought was basically just wearing those plates, so she'd have a hard copy to work onto her armor. She went into that arena not to win a match or earn money, but to splatter her enemy's blood all over her. Our boy showing up was a confusing and humiliating mess for the Crimson Hewers. "What are the chances that we'll be facing them?" Pukey asks. "Pretty high. Not guaranteed, but higher than anything else. They claim not to hold grudges, but they've been known to offer discounts on going after targets that have frustrated them in the past. So I've got some attention on us." "Great," the Hat groans. "It gets worse," Bike remarks. "Oh boy. They've got a customized type of melee weapon, something they use on all their edged toys. It's a modification to monomolecular blade weapons with how stupid sharp those are already. They found some way to modify the process and serrate monomolecular blades, somehow making them even more dangerous and much, much harder to break and capable of somehow shattering monomolecular blades on contact. To put things into proper context, a standard monomolecular blade is so sharp that you need your sheath lined with protective force fields, or it will slice through it and likely take a leg off you. Where serrated one, or a hewer as they're called, is even sharper. Mustard lets out a high-pitched whistle at that news. Sounds like a hell of a toy. If we have to fend off a pack of these women, then we should see about stealing one. Still, this seems like a sniper's problem. Sure, our bigger toys are a bit much for the station, but if they don't miss, we can easily deal with these kitty cats. If it was only them, you'd be right, Mustard. Tang and J3 are more than a match for the Crimson Hewers, especially if we can lure them into a kill box. But they're not the only problem. Counter-sniper? J3 asks. Maybe a whole team. I don't know. When some people have been causing personal offense to the gang lords, there's occasionally a strange sniping pattern. It's likely a team of 2 working in perfect unity. But there's at least one person on the station so skilled with sniping with both ablators and bangers that they can use both at once for trick shots. Video footage shows at best a distortion, so the sniper is cloaked when they take these shots, but from them always comes both the yellow plasma of a banger and the white beam of an ablator. Simultaneously, Bike explains, bringing up an image of a beam of light and a streaking ball of power shooting through the air from nothingness. How good are these trick shots? Itchy asks. They get their targets around corners and cover. They pick out individuals in moving crowds after the beam and ball have passed through heavy traffic. These people are good, Bike explains. I think I'm in love. I wonder if a girl like that's got someone, Tang mutters. Probably. Stay focused, will you? J3 asks, and Tang snorts. So we've got a gang of heavily armored shock troops, at least one expert sniper, if not more. And what else? Pukey asks. A couple more. Miss Mirror is next, Bike says, bringing up a series of images showing people in fights with themselves. A highly skilled cloaken assassin whose M.O. appears to be to take the form of their victim and publicly murder them in their own shape. She was thought of as a serial killer for several years before people put it together that her victims were all people that had in some way cheated one of the gang lords. She's apparently what they send when they want an example made out of someone. So we're going to need passcodes now. Great, Pukey groans. Calling for help in our English ought to do it, Dong remarks. Maybe not. The hack, remember? Knowledge of English is out in the galaxy at large. There's no telling what she knows. Pukey counters, and there are concerned looks all around. We have a higher toxin resistance than most races. Everyone will be carrying 2 shots of tranquilizers. Enough to make a human groggy but kill a cloaken. Can we get that balance? Mr. T asks. You'll have to ask the boss's girl, she's the medic, Bike remarks. Her name is Cindy, Pukey says in a somewhat testy tone. Bike holds up his hands in surrender. Okay, boss. Just trying to keep things light in the face of all our bad news, Bike remarks. Implying there's more? I'm afraid so. 2 more fairly well-known mercenaries call the station home, Bike says before bringing up an image of what appears to be a dainty woman in a luxurious gown. Tiny horns poke out of her blonde hair, and she frankly looks like she hasn't the slightest business in Octaron Spin. Meet Shay Mari, the pirate battle princess. The snorts around the table make Pukey scowl. He starts fiddling with his communicator and brings up an image of massive Amazonian women brutally slamming into each other and ripping the shell-like armor from one another's back. The impacts of fist to flesh are visceral enough that several of the men wince, and when one of them has her jaw dislocated and simply snaps it back into place, Pukey pauses the video. Those were the losers of a broken shell tournament. The contests where the Grand Champion and the Grand Champion alone earn the title of Battle Princess. The basic assumption with these women is that if you're not ready to take down a tank, then you don't have enough firepower. If you don't outnumber them 10-1, then you don't have enough people. Attacking with 5 or less is legally considered suicide even in civilized parts of the galaxy. If this Shay Mari is an actual battle princess, then she's likely the most dangerous living thing on the station. Pukey explains to his surprised crew as Bike nods sagely. Yeah, that's the score, Bike says before bringing up pictures of the tiny woman holding the torn-apart pieces of an air truck over her head, crushing a plasma cannon between her delicately gloved hands and casually holding a very distressed-looking Nagasha by the neck in front of an open airlock. In general, she's more to be avoided than fought. Apparently the girl's prices are pretty high, but once she gets the money, then it's considered already done, but for the details. Please tell me that's the worst of it. The hat asks and then sighs as Bike shakes his head. What next? Bike wordlessly brings up a new image. Bullshit! Airfarce protests as he beholds the black chitinous hide of the eyeless monster woman. No shit. They're called the Zedden, Bike replies. Yes, I know. They look like the aliens, but there are some differences. For instance, no acid for blood. Well, that's a relief. But a mind at least as intelligent as any one of us with a heavy propensity for traps. This girl is one of the major reasons that the Bio Barn is a hunter's paradise. So many girls are trying to be like their idol, Isma the Huntress. Her tricks range from childish images of alien women being hit in the face with rakes or pies, to the psychotic. The newest images are of corpses smashed against hard surfaces or impaled on the branches of trees. Thankfully, she usually goes for non-lethal. She's the station's capture expert, and after the Crimson Hewers who we've already bumped into, this is the person we're most likely to come up against. If any of the 8 gang lords want to talk to us or get our undivided attention, then they will hire her, and she'll leave her playground and come for us. Is that all? There are a few up-and-comers, but nothing beyond some moderately skilled criminals and killers. There are some FOSA audio adepts, but if they'll be part of anything? Bike shrugs at the end. What's the likelihood of all these forces coming together against us at once? Pukey asks, and Bike's eyebrows shoot up in shock. Are you implying that you intend to piss off the gang lords that much? Bike asks, and Pukey grins. If we make ourselves into a massive pain? If we make it personal and rub it in their faces? We may very well be facing the Octaron Spin Dream Team of their elite shock troops in the Crimson Hewers, their master snipers, Miss Mirror, the expert infiltrator, Shay Mari, the one-woman army that is a battle princess, and Isma the Huntress, a trap mistress whose mind is basically a corkscrew of pain and humiliation. If they're working together, then it's nothing short of a nightmare scenario. They know the station, they've got supplies, they've got backup, and they've got years and years and years of training and experience. Our best option would be to cut and run. Otherwise, casualties are guaranteed. I don't intend for things to get that bad. But as the saying goes, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Gentlemen, I want plans from each of you. I'll bring up some of my own. I want ways to take down each of these opponents both individually and as a group. Furthermore, I want 2 sets of each type for a total of 4 plans each. The second type is, if they get the drop on us, how do we turn an ambush into an opportunity? Pukey orders, and everyone begins to think. Meanwhile, at the Lab! The door to the laboratory opens, and Admiral Cistern steps through. His face is carefully schooled to not expose any distress. To his internal relief, several soldiers with the relief NS on armbands are in there already. Evidently, people were taking the impromptu Axiom researchers more and more seriously. Good. Admiral on deck! The nearest one notes, and the room turns to salute him. He returns the gesture crisply. Gentlemen, I'm glad to see you all working together, Admiral Cistern remarks before glancing up at the 2 still images above the group. The problem they're all working on. Security cameras in the shipboard factories had shown Engineer Pike speaking to and being assisted by a 2-dimensional figure wearing his face that was somehow capable of physically interacting with the world. Clearly, Axiom shenanigans were afoot, and he needed to know how and why. Sir, glad to have you here. We think we've isolated what caused this incident and have both good and bad news for you. Dr. Ricken is apparently speaking for the lab today. The rest are likely busy with the ship outlines they're designing and refining constantly. Bad news first, if you'd be so kind. This is not going to be the last time we will see this phenomenon. In fact, from what we've uncovered, this is the most benign and minute manifestations of this event that could have occurred. Dr. Ricken says, and Admiral Cistern gives her a curious look. Sir, if I may? Specialist Atagoke asks, and the Admiral nods. I took interest in this event for 2 reasons. First off is that Engineer Pike is a friend, and secondly in that he seemingly manifested a photon and graviton-based construct. That's my area of speciality. I use these things to create illusions with the occasional hidden punch, though I'm more of an illusionist than anything. Specialist. I understand you appreciate your recent promotion, but that's no reason to beat around the bush. Sorry, sir. Effectively, this is a known phenomenon in the galaxy at large as either a sign of an overactive imagination in extremely axiom-capable races particularly in their childhood or a massive psychotic break in a person. Amadi explains, and Admiral Cistern looks concerned. Thankfully and distressingly, this is not the case of what's happening here, which means there is another unaccounted-for variable. One which we believe we've confirmed. We haven't confirmed it, Specialist. We've hypothesized it, but have been unable to disprove it so far. Therefore, it's still an unproven model. We need to test further. Dr. Rickon chides the nerd, who frowns. What's the theory? Admiral Cistern asks, and Dr. Rickon flinches somewhat. Our hypothesis involves the differences between the human brain and the brains of the extraterrestrials. Dr. Rickon begins as she brings up some images, one side showing a human brain and the other is labeled a tret. As we've already determined during our revelation about mind reading, is that the human mind is unusual in the galaxy at large. The alien mind is streamlined and every aspect can function as every other aspect of the brain. This allows them to recover from brain damage with greater ease, but leaves them vulnerable to having their minds read. However, the prioritization and advancement of the human mind means that all a reader gets is a jumbled mess. Ordinarily an advantage, but apparently one with a downside. These projections? Admiral Cistern asks to get her back on track. Unfortunately, sir, Axiom is extremely reactive to a person's thought process. Even the smallest amount of Axiom training can lead to events like this. To put things in a pithy summation, this was Engineer Pike's inner demons manifesting physically. Specialist Lore explains, and Admiral Cistern stares at him. I must concur. Effectively, the same systems that protect us also gives conflicting signals into the Axiom. Mental issues, disorders, inner demons, or whatever else you wish to name can affect the Axiom. Not as strongly and not as readily as the active mind. But it can manifest, Amadi adds. And this is going to happen again and again? We've done some digging into things, sir. The psychological fields aren't as well regarded or studied as they are on Earth. The nature of their brain's physical structure is less prone to breaking down, in a sense at least. The phenomenon of an inner voice, inner monologue, or inner demons, in whatever forms you wish to call them, are relatively unknown, except in extreme circumstances in the galaxy. That is what's happened. Reggie found himself actually debating with his inner demons, as his subconscious need to be able to actually talk it out made it happen. So the Axiom reads and reacts to both conscious and subconscious commands? Admiral Cistern asks. Yes. It's part of why the standards of beauty the galaxy over are so universal. There merely needs to be enough activity in the brain to reach sentient or near-sentient levels to influence the Axiom. Normally, these effects are rather benign. The cross-species fertility, the near-universal female population, the physical capacity to speak a unified language, the lack of massive plagues sweeping across entire sectors. All of this is due to unconscious Axiom use, Lore explains. The problem is that it's not limited to those things. When we discovered this phenomenon in other beings, we found one more place that it often shows up, one that's especially telling as to what this actually is. Dr. Rickon says, and Admiral Cistern nods so she'll continue. Dreams, sir, in both dreams and nightmares, the unconscious use of Axiom can influence areas. Normally it's very small and benign, but truly horrific nightmares have been known to physically harm the areas around the sleepers. We've put it up to pranksters using Axiom, but, well, so you're saying that the Axiom is causing our literal nightmares to come to life? Admiral Cistern demands. Yes and no? Laura answers before running a hand through his hair. Those who sleep with unaligned Kutha on them are most prone to it. Normally a person's dream or even nightmare isn't enough. But people who've reported full-on night terrors are the ones who wake up to messed-up rooms. So why did it manifest for Engineer Pike? Admiral Cistern asks. The man in question isn't a noted Axiom user. He understands the basics as far as I know, but he shouldn't have such a level of control that his unconscious mind manifests phantoms. Kutha, it has to be. If he received a gift from his lady friends, then it might have caused enough of an unconscious channeling to manifest the phantasm, Laura says, with a look of revelation, and Amadi thinks. It's possible even at complete rest, Kutha accelerates the local Axiom through it. With direct skin contact, it can pick up anything running through a person's mind. Normally only thoughts on Axiom would activate them, but if a mind is scattered and unfocused, then it could do anything. Amadi considers. This is still conjecture and working models for the most part. We know this is not a unique phenomenon. It's usually fairly harmless with a minimum of damage and seems to be even less hazardous in this scenario. We have numerous theories, but have had insufficient time to properly test them. What is known? Dr. Rickon demand, and both Laura and Amadi look to each other, then nod. At the state we've seen things, it appears to be nothing more than a mildly more solid than standard hologram, not counting hard light. The results are a triviality to reproduce with even a small amount of technology and preparation, Laura remarks. Sir, to be completely frank, we need a lot more time to study this. We know it's not isolated, but it's something regarded as vaguely normal throughout the galaxy and dismissed as a non-issue. If you're concerned on a political front, then it shouldn't be very difficult to spin this, Dr. Rickon assures him, and then Amadi steps forward. We've been classifying and sorting all the different types of axiom use in the galaxy. There are actually a couple of martial styles that have similar effects, some where there are duplicates of the user fight alongside them, and there are others where what seem to be ghostly entities do most of the actual fighting. This may be less a mental issue and more the first step of a martial art. We need more information. I suppose it would be unreasonable of me to expect results as swiftly as conundrums appear. Admiral Cistern admits to himself, and there's a defeated air around the lab. We're researchers, sir. Some more unorthodox than others, but researchers all the same. If you want miracles, perhaps the chaplain could be of some aid, Dr. Rickon says, and Admiral Cistern chuckles lightly in response. I'm uncertain if I wish to face the wrath of a holy man considering the last lecture I got from the man, Admiral Cistern says in an amused tone. You were lectured by Padre Gonzalez? Why? Laura asks in a flabbergasted tone. As many men on the ship go to the good father and his kin for confession and understanding, many of them come to me for the same, or rather to vent their frustrations. Most recently, Chaplain Gonzalez expressed his frustration at the logistical difficulty in trying to figure out how to do an appropriate ceremony for 100 women and a single man that won't drag on for more than a quarter of a day. Admiral Cistern remarks with a smile. Everyone is confiding in someone. I'm sorry we couldn't do better, sir, Amadi says, and Admiral Cistern nods. I don't expect miracles. Just your best, Admiral Cistern remarks, and there are some nods all around. If you want some better news, sir, I have a copy of the latest blueprints the rest of the scientists have been working on. Well, latest as of 2 hours ago. They've been moving with such alacrity that they might have thrown this out and started again. In brief, I'm needed back at my desk shortly. If the paperwork for dealing with a claimant of territory surrounding cruel space were on physical paper, it would be several stories tall. They want it in triplicate, Admiral Cistern remarks. Good God. That's a marathon. You must have several hours in the day you dedicate wholly to that mess. Dr. Rickon mutters. As a matter of fact, I do. It starts in 20 minutes, Admiral Cistern admits, and the good doctor's eyes widen. Very well, sir, she says, and she inserts a USB drive and quickly brings up some images. The ships are boxy with clearly marked grappling arms that unfold from the sides and large engines in the rear. They're very chunky and basic-looking with a cutaway that has a dizzying amount of writing and mathematical equations around the engines. These ships are very much prototypes to be tested to destruction. The general idea is a new form of dual-mode engine designed to purge itself of all axiom at a moment's notice. For backup, it will have standard rockets, but we've been experimenting with laser-based propulsion. It should allow these ships to move away from a Dauntless-class vessel with a minimal of fuel use, allowing them to save nearly the entire tank for the return trip. This is when it's in the null. In axiom, it can move with great alacrity, but we're still experimenting on further. From the looks of it, they're also going into ways of directly using solid fuel bricks instead of dissolving it into liquid fuel first. The working name seems to be the Hades engine. Why is it named after the god of the underworld? Laura asks as he reads over the schematics. Because the Helios engine and Prometheum engine were taken, Dr. Rickon jokes. In all seriousness, this is about saving a huge amount of space and using compression and extreme heat to control the fuel. It's a work in progress, but if it's successful, it should allow much more powerful engines at a quarter of our current sizes, and we can increase fuel storage by doing away with liquid fuel altogether and switch over entirely to solid fuel bricks. Very innovative. I look forward to seeing the next iteration, hopefully with a clearer image of these Hades engines. If they're even half as effective as the team seems to be predicting, then they'll be a wonderful addition to our technological capabilities, Admiral Cistern says before checking his watch. And I have just enough time for a light snack before resuming the paperwork. Keep up the good work, remember? Research is not a miracle-laden sprint, but a marathon where you hunt down all the available truths you can find. Yes, sir, his people respond with a salute. Admiral Cistern nods and returns it before promptly leaving the area.